Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, a weekly podcast discussing innovative ideas in business and technology from unconventional and often overlooked sources. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hi, Tanner.
Hey, I'm glad we were able to record this week. I know there's been sickness affecting me, so I apologize if I sound a little bit snuffly or hack into the microphone a few times.
We'll edit most of that out. No. So before we dive in today, some cool stuff coming up. We have interviews coming up again. We've got a lot of feelers out there. A lot of people are reaching out to us, and we're booking more guests coming up soon. More interviews coming from it. We're talking people in the venture capital sphere. We're talking personal life coaches. We're talking famous TikTokers. We've got someone who started their own branding business and lots, just a variety of really interesting perspectives coming out there. And those are all coming up in the future. Am I missing anything else, Tanner?
No, I'm excited to get back to interviewing and not have to come up with original ideas every week. But there's something fun about this too. It's nice to dive deep and think critically about, what's affecting us.
Absolutely. So speaking of what affects us, the topic today was chosen by me based off of, well, honestly, being a human being alive today. I'll explain what I mean. Our topic's fear. What I want to talk about. There's a lot of things right now that are causing fear. The news, you can't avoid it. I tried not to read or watch the news ever because it's never good. But I have to stay up with current events, So 2023 so far, let's just dive in there. Mass tech layoffs. According to layoff.fyi, 483 tech companies have had layoffs already this year. As of today, with Meta announcing another 10,000, the total number of tech layoffs, just tech layoffs, is 138,000 just in the last 2 months. So mass layoffs, recession fears, we're all feeling it. It started out as a joke about how expensive eggs are, and now people are feeling that impending recession and what that could mean for them. And then you can go global with crazy things going on, like wars and threats of wars. You have Ukraine and Russia still going on. You have Russia and US. You have China and US. You have North Korea and the US. It feels very kind of like we're butting heads in global politics. And there's just so much out there. What I'm trying to say that can just bear down on someone's mind. And it started to get me a little down, but then I had to kind of catch myself and say, you can see the pattern building up. But what about for you? All this stress, all this fear, how have you been looking at it so far this year? Do you feel the same thing, Tanner?
Well, I'm definitely feeling the same pressures as you when it comes to the tech layoffs in particular, because I'm currently an account manager at a staffing firm. We're seeing it quite significantly, actually, even affecting a lot of companies here in the central US, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, all these different places. One, a lot of companies, because they were growing so quick, or a lot of people were growing so quick, and there was cheap credit, so you could afford to borrow a lot to do these giant initiatives. And, I'm sure you saw a lot of this in your consulting business too, a lot of modernization projects, cloud migrations, all of these things were happening, and people were just spending like crazy the past few years, and they were growing and growing and growing their teams. And this year in particular, some of my best clients last year that, we were just trying to feed as many candidates, sent resumes every day that we could. Those people have scaled back. They're like, hey, we heard from above, we don't have the budget. So we're going to pull back significantly in the amount that we are hiring for. Of those that we are still need, we're just going to try to fill those internally. And kind of that momentum that was happening for just the talent demanding so much of the market, and it was kind of that world, and the employees were just trying to have to give every concession they could, more pay, remote work, all these benefits and perks and 4-day work weeks and all this stuff. And now significantly changed because you have not only the companies scaling back, but like you were saying, massive amounts of layoffs. So you have highly skilled, very capable, well-experienced people needing a job. And if you're an average person, especially in the tech industry, in like development or DevOps or all these different things, if you were kind of struggling on the cusp before, now you're bottom of the barrel because you're competing with some of the best from the best brand names that there are. I mean, how many people here in Nebraska would love to have a Facebook slash Meta employee or a former Googler on their team, because not only are they going to be skilled, but they can bring a lot of insight on how things were done there that maybe could be incorporated in some other companies. So yeah, it's been pretty eye opening how very much almost on a dime it can change. It was basically, I think it was about Q4 last year, we started to see a little bit. And then right when we hit the brand new year, all the brakes got hit. So,
No, absolutely. And I think a big piece of it, and why I kind of started to think about it and why it started to weigh on my mind a little bit, and I think is really relatable. People still have PTSD from COVID. And there were so many layoffs in 2020 when that really, hit full force. People find, some people for the first time ever in their generation experienced mass layoffs like that. So there's this PTSD aspect of layoffs now. They're hearing 130,000 tech layoffs, and they fear the ripple wave and repercussions of that. And you're seeing it in your industry. I'm seeing it in my industry. And I think most people in most industries are starting to, if they don't immediately feel it, start bracing, it's just you're spot on. It's a ripple effect, and it'll have so many impacts for so long, what they're doing with all those well-trained, educated people out there looking for jobs. But
yeah, and we're seeing that too with the same patterns. So I was doing sales in 2019. I started, we worked on a brand new product for kind of a rebrand for the managed service company I worked for, Honorbound IT. And 2020 was going to be our year to unleash this to the world and sell it and show all the great stuff that happened. And then we got locked in our homes. We didn't know. So how do you sell when there's so much uncertainty and all those things? And then it took a while to get back into it. And I'm seeing so many of the same patterns again that with this, where before you could call on somebody and there'd be a lot of demand. Now that demand is just significantly different. So the selling game really changes, where it is more relationship based. It is more around delivery and fulfillment, and giving the best quality experience you can. Because if someone's going to go outside to spend their money, they're going to want to get the best service or product or whatever possible. So yeah, I'm just like you said, I'm also feeling some of those same things, and it can be crippling, right? You can start feeling those pressures or getting those triggers, and then you could want to kind of retreat back into or run away from it, or just feel like you can't handle it, or you can go the reverse way and you can overwork because you're like, man, I gotta prepare for this stuff.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So let's continue on this fear topic. So we understand 2023 sucks for, we get it. It's a running joke. It's been doing this for 3 years. But let's move on to that. But let's dig deeper into fear, because I think relative to our podcast, this is why I wanted to bring it up. Entrepreneurship is rife with fear. The entire thing is fear-based. And honestly, sometimes the winners of the entrepreneurial race, as it is, are those who figure out how to manage their fear or face their fear, right? But let's talk about types of fear. Okay, besides fear of layoff, right, or fear of global war, how can we break down fear further, Tanner?
Types of fear from the reading that I've been doing. There's some books that distill into three. I really like this one that goes into four. So there's the fear of failure. So clearly that's one that we're all familiar with to some degree. There's the fear of judgment or ridicule. So you go out and you want to do something. What are other people going to say and think about you? And is that going to be negative? There's the fear of uncertainty, which is so much of what we just talked about already. And then there's uniquely the fear of success. So I figured we could kind of dive into each of these, give some examples, whether they be just some general ones or from our own lives of what we've done and maybe how we have overcome them or how we're hoping to overcome them, because I would say I'm far from being have solved this problem.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm really excited for the discussion on the fear of success, because I think that's one a lot of people don't spend a lot of time dwelling on, or considering being a fear. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Absolutely. So first fear category is the fear of failure. I think anyone who has a second to be honest with themselves has experienced the fear of failure, right? I feel that's just what our entire school system is based off of, right? Our entire schooling system is based off of the fear of failure.
So in a recent podcast I was listening to, they said something that put a lot of context. So back in, 50,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago when human, if you failed, that often meant you died. If you went out hunting and you didn't actually kill something, you didn't eat. If you went out foraging and you didn't find berries, you didn't eat. If you tried to jump over a ledge and broke your leg, you were probably dead because there was no doctor to set those bones or do those things. All the risk that you took had an inherent like severity to it that could hurt you or kill you. So in our brains, they're hardwired to think if I fail, I could die. This is an existential threat to me. And in some ways, that has translated over to things that clearly are not existential threats. Things like public speaking. If I go up there and I miss say something and I look like a fool, my brain has the same like fear that is the same thing as like, some giant beast charging me. And you have to realize, okay, that's not rational, and you have to overcome those things. But I thought that was really unique because or a unique perspective, because I never really thought that my initial primal brain would had so much control over this stuff. I always felt like it was maybe, I don't know, something from the past that I have done wrong, or I haven't conditioned that out of me or something like that. What's your thoughts there?
No, that's honestly that makes me feel better about myself. No, I mean it's kind of funny when you think that this innate fear of failure started from when we were cavemen jumping over ledges and trying to hunt for our meals, and now it expresses itself by being afraid of failing in a PowerPoint presentation, right? But regardless, I know exactly what you're saying, and yeah, I think it takes a lot of weight off of people's shoulders when you look at it from that perspective, because everyone has a fear of failure. No one wants to look like a fool. Everyone wants to be respected, et cetera, et cetera. Knowing that you're not just deathly afraid of failure because of, like you said, some childhood trauma, whatever it was, but knowing that this is a human reaction designed to keep you alive, designed to keep you healthy, designed to keep you moving forward. I kind of like that perspective, really. Anything to take the blame off of me.
Well, and we'll dive deeper into, how to overcome these things. But one of the bigger things with failure is you just really need to experience it more and realize that it's not going to kill you. So if you are afraid of, let's say, public speaking or something like that, the best remedy is just exposure therapy. Just go out and start speaking and realize, oh, okay, like what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I say something wrong. They laugh. Maybe I go home that night and just go, man, that wasn't that great, but they'll forget and you'll speak again. Tomorrow's a new day. There's so much by actually like, at least if you tried and you were genuine and you failed, people aren't going to, hold you that much against it. And if you do fail on something big, you usually can find paths to correct those things. Let's say it's a big thing for work. You are trying to do a big project. At the end, you just can't get there. Again, if you did a genuine effort, you showed your step, you showed you worked, it just didn't work out, well, then you can try again on the next round, most likely. Or perhaps you lose that client, but because you're doing your best, there'll be more clients, there'll be more things. You just got to kind of step out of the initial moment, I feel like, and go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and you almost hit on a point there that I want to elaborate on. What you're referring to, it depends on effort, right? You can't just blame I'll get them next time, mentality if you didn't give it your all, is what you said. You put all your effort into it. And I think that's a key point. Being honest with yourself, knowing, did I really give it all my effort? Did I really, give it the old college try, that sort of thing?
And I struggle a lot with this fear of failure because there's something in me, like something just through habits and how I view myself and how I judge myself is I don't I don't want to be the person who fails. I've always kind of built myself off of being the person who can deliver or who can create these neat things or do this, solve this unique problem and do whatever. And so when I put when I'm in situations where I am going to fail, and especially if I am not in control, or if
Mhm.
for that, I really struggle with that because I've again, and it probably just goes back to how I view myself, and maybe I need to again try failing more in some ways, and expressing that it's not a bad thing. But yeah, it's something I've really had issues with.
Yeah. No, I agree. I have as well. I think everyone feels that. Um, but you made another excellent point about it's different when you have control over it, right? You can fail off of your own volition, and sometimes you can fail despite your best efforts, despite yourself, right? Um, and I think that's one of the key reasons to relate back and circle back to layoffs. I think is why, of course, the fear of uncertainty is a big piece of, but fear of failure. A layoff isn't just I lost my biweekly check. It's a gap in your resume now. It feels personal, like you were not good enough to stay at that company, and you begin feeling like a failure in that sense, and it strips away the confidence really quickly. And I think that's why there's this huge panic right now with all of these layoffs, because people who felt that back in 2020, I was there, I did it, I felt it. It's not something you want to do again. And it's not just about money. Don't get me wrong. Paychecks are paychecks, and most people need those. I know I do, but the way it whittled away your confidence in your abilities so fast was what was pretty scary about layoffs. But
Yeah, and the one thing with layoffs too, I was just reading a post on LinkedIn today, and the guy was saying, closed my first house on the 22nd, got laid off on the 24th. And yeah, and there's just something that is so fear inducing because again, you're thinking like you judge yourself not only on the things you produce, but the things you have, and like closing a house is a big milestone on that. And if you failed in a sense to keep your income and you would lose the house, that's just another failure off of those things. Um, yeah, yeah. All right. So the second one, fear of judgment or ridicule.
yeah, I think this one is a big one for me, and in relation to we've talked about on this podcast is that imposter syndrome. This is imposter syndrome. I feel fits very well in this fear of judgment and ridicule. The fear that you're going to be found out as a phony or not as good as you are, that sort of thing is that imposter syndrome that attacks a lot of people. And yeah, and if you really kind of dig into the root cause of that, it's the judgment, it's the ridicule, it's maybe it's flashbacks to being bullied on the playground in elementary school. Who knows? The ridicule, it's a dangerous fear, and it can be crippling to a lot of people.
Yeah, this is actually one of the fears that I feel like I've done the best with. And it's probably just due to that exposure therapy. So I've had a very public facing job for a long time. I started working, I don't know, probably when I was around 12 years old making websites. But when I was 15, I started working at McDonald's. And you would have just, not only people would look down on you and you're just like, what's going on there? But you just would get in all these interactions where people would judge you because you couldn't deliver, their food got messed up or all these different things. And then going into the retail business for so many years, there's just so much said about you and so much done that you get an iron, you know, thick iron skin about it. And so I have gotten to the point where I very much am unaffected about what other people say about me, what other people think about me. If you can survive the land of Google reviews, um, and as we're learning the YouTube comments and things like that, it doesn't matter as much. But I'll say with the caveat, I do have people that I do look up to or I do value, and especially value their opinion. And it can be hard to understand, that judgment from them as well, whether it's justified or not. So that can be either limiting in some ways or it can help keep me in check in others.
That's a good point. Judgment from mentors or people you look up to, that could be especially hurtful, huh? Especially painful. Or, and I don't want to jump ahead. Of course, we're not just here to talk about all the millions of ways people can be scared. We'll talk about how people bottle that. But man, I don't know about running through the gauntlet to get exposure therapy for that one. Props to you. I think this is a big one for me that I have yet to figure out, but I've gotten better at. And I tell everyone that since I've turned 30, the amount of how much I don't care about other people's opinions, it's vastly changed my perspective on life. But professionally, I think is a huge one. I don't like being ridiculed or judged professionally. And if I guess you can evaluate that one, and it fits under fear of failure, fits out of fear of judgment, fits in the fear of uncertainty, maybe even fear of success. The workplace is a whole other world in terms of your personality sometimes, right? If someone criticizes Wyatt at home, by myself, my personal being, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't shake me. But for some reason, judgment on my work ability just makes me mad or shut in. So maybe I should encourage more bad comments and just get that exposure, Tanner. No?
Yeah. And it's so much just realizing that it's not around your identity is not necessarily just the judgment of others. I loved Andrew Ambritz said in a previous interview we did from, your brand is what people think of you, but you are not what people think of you. And so a brand can be shapen, it can be built or it can be lost, but you yourself are not. So just realizing that I think is a huge thing. I also wanted to touch back, in the fear of failure, and we're hitting on that too, was kind of the fear of loss is kind of built into that failure as well. Just that's another part of, you have something and you value it, and then you're just afraid of losing those things too. So much of what we are fearful of is basically what we value, either purposefully or just kind of instinctually or subconsciously. Which that takes us to fear of uncertainty or the unknown. And this is by far my biggest issue. How about you?
Well, see, I was thinking this is by far my least, visible fear or issue is the fear of uncertainty. So I'm curious to see how our personalities split on this, because fear of judgment is huge for me and fear of uncertainty is huge for you. So why don't you talk about fear of uncertainty from your perspective?
Yeah, I was talking to Emily about this, and I am the type of person who hates surprises and not knowing and being uncertain on anything. And I'll actually like look stuff up on TV shows so I know what's going to happen so I can enjoy the TV show. I don't like the thrill
You're a
ride of not
sick
knowing.
individual. Sick.
Yeah. So my favorite shows are actually ones based off of books that I've read because I know what's going to happen. Like Game of Thrones, absolutely loved it, minus the last two seasons. But I knew it was going to happen, and I was going to see how they were going to adapt it and do all this stuff. And we were recently watching The Last of Us, and I never played that game. And so I had to really hold myself back from going on all the wikis or watching a playthrough or doing all this stuff because I wanted to know. And so I'm just weird that way. Anytime that there is something off my radar or something that's just completed, I'm perfectly fine with it. It's that transitionary period of like, is it going to work out? Is it going to not? That's when I'm just a bundle of stress and anxiety. And again, whatever the result is, good or bad, just washes away from me. I've had some, big business deals that would have been hugely, financially beneficial and transformational just crumble in terrible ways. And once I know, I'm like, okay, on to the next one. But until then, and it can be even a small deal, I'll stress out about the weirdest stuff.
Well, if anyone should get some negative comments, it should be you for reading about how TV shows end. You sick man. No, I'm just kidding. That is weird, but I still love you, Tanner. No. So the uncertainty for me, like, no one likes to not know or be able to expect what's coming next. I'm sure there's some weird reptilian part of our brain back, caveman days or something, where that was valuable. I could imagine that. I think for the most part, for me, I've developed a very lackadaisical, that's cool, man, kind of attitude about a lot of things. I like surprises. I mean, I prefer good surprises, but it's taken a lot of, I think, a lot of effort on my part to become the kind of person who says, like, oh, well, I can't control that, right? And I used to try to. It used to stress me out. And figuring that, man, something crazy is going to happen. My hot water heater is going to go out, or something stupid that I can't expect, I didn't plan for. It's going to throw my whole vibe off. I've just kind of developed I'm not a psychic. How was I supposed to know that was going to happen type attitude? So it's interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that about you and your extreme dislike of surprises, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it's once it happens, it's not a big deal. Like we had
Right.
our
And that's
furnace
funny.
and water heater, or our water heater went out this year, and our furnace went out this year within like a week of each other. And
Yeah.
I could handle it, no problem. It's like they're dead, we'll replace it, we'll fix it. But if the water heater was maybe going out, that is what kills me. It's like you got to just tell me, is it good or is it bad? That's the part that I really struggle with. And I was just thinking with you, because in your job is all about change management, and it's all about
Sure.
change and all these other things. So in many ways for you, you probably have that exposure therapy through your career
Hmm.
of constantly dealing with flux and change and uncertainty and being able to adapt very quickly and those things.
You might be onto you might be onto something there. That makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to think on that.
All right, and the final one, and this one I thought was kind of, I don't know, the most interesting is the fear of success.
I'm gonna let you go straight to the book references and your understanding of this, because I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm afraid you're gonna surprise me.
So, so much of this is wrapped around, again, our identities. So if we view ourselves as a builder, what are we once whatever we're building is built? If we view ourselves as someone who is always chasing after something, or always trying to achieve something, or is always working up and all these things, what happens when we catch the carrot on the stick? But our whole life is built around catching that carrot. That's the real fear, because once you get close, you realize, well, my whole world's going to change if I'm successful. And a good analogy of this is actually something on the lower totem. So let's say that you are trying to get sober. If you are successful in that, your world is going to change, but it's not going to necessarily be all for the better. There's repercussions. Your social network and your life is built perhaps around drinking and all of your friends groups. Perhaps your partnership, your relationship is someone who does that, and that might cause some issues. By you being successful is going to cause all sorts of ripples of the other types of fear in your life as well, just because you do succeed in something like that. So that's going to make you afraid to want to actually make that change and be a success, because you don't know if, like, all of a sudden, well, I used to go hang out on Friday nights with my friends and we'd go to the bar, but now that I'm sober, maybe you can do that. Maybe you can just get a club soda with lime or something. But if you have a severe problem, maybe that's too much temptation. So you either have to talk with your friends about meeting at some other places, or you might have to get new friends.
So I'm glad we were on the same page. This is exactly how I was interpreting it, except mine was much more childish than your analogy. Um, I was thinking there's one episode in the entire series of Tom and Jerry where Tom the cat catches Jerry the mouse, right? Like, dead to rights, cannot get out of it. There's no saving him, straight up caught. And what does the cat do? He kind of looks around confused for a while, and then he lets the mouse go. And how long is that? Was that TV show on air? I don't know. A very long time, I'm assuming. So that's probably
Yep.
hundreds of episodes of this damn cat chasing
Can I
this
share
mouse.
a quick? Can I share a quick theory with Tom and Jerry that I read recently?
Yes.
So apparently, the theory is that they were buddies, and the whole reason that Tom got brought into the house was to catch the cat or to catch the mouse, because Tom's the cat, yeah, Tom cat, and then Jerry's the mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Tom catches the mouse, and this is probably goes with fear of success too. If he catches the
Ooh.
mouse, he has no purpose to be in the house and he's afraid he would get put back outside.
Oh.
So they're actually friends playing this game in some way, just to make it look like there's this huge thing to justify both of their positions.
I love this theory. I'm gonna from here on out. That is fact in my head. That's amazing. So yes, Tom and Jerry, great example of fear of success. A bit more childish, but no, this is great stuff. And I think the fear of success is it's a fear that I think a lot of people don't realize is subconscious, which makes it difficult. I think people subconsciously can sabotage themselves um, out of success. They don't even realize it. They want to succeed. They are talking about succeeding. They are making the steps to succeed. And then subconsciously, they may sabotage themselves. And this goes for careers. This goes for projects. This goes for relationships. I think fear of success might be one of the most insidious fears on this list because you don't always understand that you're afraid at that moment.
Yeah. Well, because once you get it again, how are you going to know? You got to have a new goal then. And that's hard. If you've been chasing your whole life for one thing, once you get it, what are you going to chase next? So that's a big thing. So a lot of people will just always keep themselves away so they always can keep their routines. But yeah, let's jump into overcoming fear. So I have a quote from the book, The Greatness Mindset, and I wanted to share it with you and get your opinion because it was a really unique thing. I thought it was very topical. So in the book, there's this quote from Mel Robbins, and he talks about something called the reticular activating system, or RAS. And how Mel explained it was, imagine a hairnet on your brain, only it's electric, meaning it's alive. The RAS has one job, and the job is to block out 99% of what's going on and let in 1% of what we need to know at this moment in history. Your RAS has a monster job. It's like a bouncer at a bar that says, you're not coming in. But this is the $1 billion thing that everybody needs to know. The bouncer in your brain lets in whatever you think is most important to you. So when you get intentional about telling your brain what's important to you, your brain literally is like, "Hey, come on in." Here's the downside of this though. If you told yourself you're a bad person for let's say the last 10 years, guess what your brain thinks is important? Unquote. So when we talk about what we're fearful of, it's because we're deeming it in some way important, right? It goes back to value. And there is so much terrible things in the world that happen. So, what you opened up with the layoffs, the wars, the recessions, and all these things. Those are things that have probably been happening in good times too, when we weren't fearful. But for some reason right now, we're feeling that it's important. And our brain, that bouncer in our brain is saying, hey, come on in. So what's your thoughts there?
No, I think a that quote is like goosebumps inducing quote. I think you've figured me out when it comes to quotes. Love it. Uh, and man, the implications of that are so huge. Um, like you said, negative self talk um, is huge. You know, depression, ADHD, all of these disorders. Maybe there's something to that. I'm not going to go down that path, but everything, social media, media in general, the news, I have picked up my news watching for the last couple months because I am fascinated with, global politics. And maybe that, has a big piece of it. I've allowed more in my brain. I'm starting to feel those effects. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's like, because I was thinking about this. Let's say you do experience something and you have a reaction, and all of those things were either being set up before, or even if it turns out good. So let's take a good example was the Silicon Valley Bank happened this past week, as we're
Hmm.
the
Right.
week before we were recording this, and for the over the weekend, Twitter was exploding because they're like, this could cause a chain. This could all the regional banks could go out. All these terrible, terrible things could happen.
Hmm.
And in the end, thankfully, the government stepped in, did what I believe is the right thing. They're keeping the depositors whole, and they're
Hmm.
letting the bank itself fail. Um, so in the end, it was kind of a nothing burger, but we were all just overcome with fear and anxiety because we felt exposed. And in many ways, we're just not setting ourselves up securely right. Again, our foundation, going back to our whether that be ourselves and our mind, body, and spirit, in our home, whether that's our relationships or our actual physical shelter and those things, or all the things that we care about. We just feel vulnerable on those things, and we're trying to I don't know, patch it when the waters are patch the wall while the water's already flowing through.
Hmm.
And it's just part of it's just realizing that we're not as secure as we probably should be, and a little bit of accountability needs to be taken upon ourselves. And we like to just kind of rush to do that when we're forced to, rather than being proactive about it.
Right. So, fear is an excellent motivator, which we'll talk about here in a minute. You know, back to you mentioned the fear of uncertainty being a huge one for you. Um, not the not knowing thing, and outside of your sick habit of knowing how TV shows end, the rest of it makes sense to me. But it's something. And you and I have talked about this offline before several times. Big fan of reading. I don't want to be that guy, but yeah, I like reading some Stoicism books, and it I don't know, connects with me. It makes sense to me. It's kind of a philosophy that meshes with how I think. But so one of the most famous Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, he wrote a book called Meditations. Marcus Aurelius, of course, being Roman emperor, he wrote a book called Meditations, which was actually like a diary he never even wanted published. But I keep saying irregardless. That's not a word, people. It's regardless, not irregardless. Anyways, okay, self-corrected. Back to the quote. So Marcus Aurelius, in his book Meditations, he wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." And love that quote. It's very poetic, but the foundation of Stoicism is just accepting that something's going to happen. If I'm stressed about it today, if something tomorrow happens and I'm stressed about it today, I've ruined 2 days, right? Um, Essentially, the whole foundation of Stoicism is about accepting where you are presently in the current day, knowing tomorrow's going to happen, something's going to happen, but there's no way you can control that. And the best you can do is arm yourself and prepare yourself, but without ruining your life around a potential future that most likely will never happen. This is Stoicism has been a good thing for me in dealing with fear and in accepting things. Things are going to happen to me, life events, etc. And personally, I found a lot of help from that.
Yeah, I've read Meditations as well, and there's many quotes to just keep everything in context. And it is a big thing just realizing that you are in control of how you react to any given situation. And then there's another author I really like, Eckhart Tolle, who's a modern day person, and he's got a book, The Power of Now, which talks a lot about being present, but has a similar mind of you can react. You can do basically three things in any situation. You can accept it in its entirety. You can try to change it, or you can remove yourself from it. And those are really the only three things you can do. Ruminating over it, just getting mad over it, is not doing any of those three things. And once you're done being stressed and mad and all those things, the problem's still there with you. So you really only have those three options. And let's say that you're in a bad situation, it's late at night, a tire pops in your car. You could be frustrated, you could do all this, or you can just be rational. You can accept it, figure out what you're going to do to change your circumstance, fix the car, deal with it, and move on. And if there is something to where you can't move on, let's say there's something big in your life with your health or something like that, and you can't change it, the only thing left is to accept it and embrace it. And that mindset thing that we were talking about, where having that positive mindset on those things, or the way you self-talk to yourself, that's a huge part on how you see the world and how you make your way through it.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, it's well said. I like the thing about tire pops. It's not easy though. And some people just don't have the kind of personality for that. I think a lot of anger comes from uncertainty, and particularly angry people have a hard time accepting reading stoicism as anything other than BS. And I get that. We're saying a lot of lofty ideals. It's not that easy, and stressors happen, and life's going to suck, and it's going to punch you in the face sometimes. But as you've pointed out, reading about all the potential wars, I Googled to the ones digit how many people have been laid off today. Maybe I'm letting all this crap in, and it's making me more feel fearful or more stressed out than is necessary. And I think that's the message we're trying to get across is it feels like the world sucks right now. It probably is. What you allow in your life, though, to impact your life is a decision, unfortunately. And maybe I need to shut off the news for a while. But
Yep.
what I wanted to get around in a positive thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Tanner.
Oh, I was just going to lead us into, I mean, we touched on it before, but it goes back to so much you can control. So you can't control what's happening on the news, what's happening in the world away. You can't control these layoffs, but to focus on what you can control. And a lot of times, if you are fearful in many ways, you can try to harness that. Or if you're just focus on the things that you can control. And that's, as we go, the whole point of this podcast, even in times of uncertainty with low, maybe we're headed into a recession. I started my first company in a recession and it was successful. A lot of the most successful businesses in the tech world were started in the hardest times. And so it's really about focusing on what you can control and what you can do with that, right?
Absolutely. So if you feel some sort of impending doom, you're concerned the layoffs are going to impact you. What are exactly what you said? What possible paths do you have to take with that newfound information that may or may not be true? You can accept it. You can try and impact it. Or there was the third one. I'm missing one.
You remove yourself from it entirely.
Remove yourself from it. So you probably can't remove yourself from it. That's your job. Can you impact it? Maybe. And, that would be in terms of making yourself more valuable to your employer, getting new certifications, taking on extra work, seeking out a promotion, those sort of things, which can motivate you to move further in there. But another way to accept it, once again, true or false doesn't matter at this point. You need to accept the stress. You need to accept the fear. Now's your time, baby. Get started on that side project. Get started on that, your side hustle or whatever you call it. You've been working on that coding project of that app idea you've had for 5 years. Now's the time to sit down and start working on it. The easiest thing you could do as an entrepreneur, so let's circle back to entrepreneurship. The easiest thing you can do when you have fear, bare bones, best thing you can do, starting if you have nothing, you have no mailing list, you have no website, you don't even have a business. First thing you can do with fear is start making content. Just put content out. Make YouTube videos. Make a podcast. Start a blog. No one's going to watch it. No one's going to read it. No one's going to care. But what you're doing is you're setting up your backlog. You are making content. You're learning. You're putting stuff out there, and you're taking a risk. And you're not expecting to make money off it. Your blog post or your crappy YouTube video, the first one you put out, it's not going to make any money. Your expectation shouldn't be to make money. Your expectation should be, hey, now's my chance. I wanted to do this. Let's play with it. Let's do something. That's my perspective on fear.
Well, and just taking that first step. And as we said, like your caveman brain thinks, heck, I'm going to die if I fail. But we're in a world now where it's not. We've had a guest on who put all of his money, all of his focus, maxed out his credit cards for a business because he's like, what's the worst that can happen? I go bankrupt. He's like, that's not the end of the world. It's not going to kill him if his business fails, but what's his return? Well, in the process of doing it, he's finding fulfillment. He's very motivated. He's filling his days with meaningful work. He's got a great mission, a great upside, and then the reward that he can get from that is fantastic. So just take the first step, do the action, don't be afraid. And then if you just keep doing it, like we're saying, you're not as, the more you get exposed to it, the less it hurts. So Wyatt's good with change. I'm good with people saying crappy things to me. Write them in the comments. You can talk about or what you should do is write in the comments spoilers for TV shows so Wyatt gets spoiled. And then
I have not played The Last of Us, and if one of you people ruin it for me, I swear.
Yeah, so I'll be moderating the comments, I guess. But I think we touched on the topic pretty well.
Yeah. So this is a fun topic. It's a serious topic though, because I was genuinely feeling fear this last week or so, and I had to sit down and I asked Tanner, I was like, hey man, we have just coffee over Skype. We live 4 or 5 hours away. Tanner joined me for coffee over the weekend. I was like, man, that world sucks right now. Right. But fortunately we have this outlet, we have this podcast that we love and that we're going to keep making content for, and we're going to keep having interviews and great stuff. And sometimes we're going to have some serious conversations about, how we're feeling and how we think it might relate to others out there. But I appreciate having this platform to do that.
Yeah, I do as well. It's, again, the highlight of my week, and I really love learning new things and thinking like, oh, how can I bring that up in the podcast? And it helps me retain things a lot better too, because anytime you have to remember, you should try to think of it as though you're going to be teaching it. And so then it kind of sticks with you. But
absolutely.
Anyways, make sure that you like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Music. I had a few people message me and they're like, oh, I realized I hadn't done that yet. And so They did it. So thank you so much. And share with your friends if you find this valuable. So, all right. Well, we will see you all next week.